Hi class, and welcome to this Year 12 Business Management video. We are covering Unit 1, Outcome 1 content here, and it is actually the first key knowledge point of the entire year, which is types of businesses. So welcome to your Year 12 Business Management journey. Let's get right in and see what we're going to be learning in today's video. We're going to focus in a video on one or a couple of key knowledge points. And this one is going to be all about the types of businesses. Particularly, I'm going to hope by in this video that you understand what we mean by a sole trader, a partnership, a private limited company, a publicly listed company, and social enterprise and government business enterprises. Specifically, because we're in Year 12, we're going to have a focus on exam questions. Many exam questions talk about discuss, which requires us to understand the advantages and disadvantages of these types of businesses. So by the end of this video, I hope that you understand what these types of businesses are, their characteristics, and importantly, the advantages and disadvantages. So let's jump in. Australia operates what we are known as a mixed economy, and that means there is a mix of ownerships and types of businesses. This means the ownership of resources and factors of production are shared between private individuals and the government. So that means we have a mixture in our economy of businesses owned by private individuals and the government. As a result, that means there's lots of different types of businesses that operate in Australia, and we listed them before. So really quickly, we are talking about sole traders, partnerships, companies, and you can see there is two types of companies, a private limited company and a publicly listed company. And then we have two that you might not have heard of before, which we call enterprises. And these are social enterprises and government business enterprises. And all of these are in the Year 12 study design. So all of these could be examinable. So what do we mean by a sole trader? When we are talking about a sole trader, what do we mean by this? And this will be part of your definition or your state part of your answer. This is a type of business that is run by one individual owner. And that is under their own name or a registered business name. So that is an important characteristic to list. A sole trader only has one individual owner. And as a result, the owner and the business are one entity. And you can see I'm going to underline often in these videos the parts of the slides that are bold, because these are the parts that we want to see in your answers. Because they are one entity, sole traders, the individual business owner, is entitled to keep all of the profits after the taxes are paid, but they are liable for all the losses. So they get to have all the reward, but all of the bad losses as well. So you might even be starting to think this is quite a risky type of business, but it can pay off big. So let's jump into the advantages, which I'm going to be calling benefits here, and limitations of a sole trader. And this is the important bit to understand. The major benefits are that it is the simplest and most inexpensive type of business to establish. It is just one owner. It doesn't have a lot of regulation or paperwork required to set up. In fact, you could set one up very quickly yourself. And hence it is simple and inexpensive. And these are some important terms to have in your written responses. Because there is just one owner, this individual owner has creative control of all the business decisions. And there might be a disadvantage to that, and we'll go into that. But to have all of the creative control is an advantage. There's not going to be disagreements. If you want to do something as a business owner, you get to do it. The other advantage is that the owner, as we mentioned, is entitled to all the profits generated. So if you make $1 million of profit after tax, the business owner gets to keep it. And as we briefly mentioned prior, that because it is the simplest and least expensive to set up, there is minimal legal paperwork to establish or wind up, which means close the business. So lots of benefits. The limitations are, and the major one, I'm going to underline an important two words, the owner is exposed to unlimited liability. An important thing to recognize, because we'll talk about that a bit later. This means the business owner is personally liable for any debts incurred by the business, and any personal assets or any personal wealth the owner has outside of the business might be taken or seized to pay back those debts. So that means if a business has lots of debt and is making not any profit, but the business owner has a house or a car or other assets, the other people will be able to take them as payment if the business can't pay their debts. Now, we mentioned that the individual business owner has all creative control, and that's an advantage. But the disadvantage of this is that the business may be limited to the expertise and ideas of the owner. So that means, yes, you have creative control, but just one person is not going to be an expert at everything. And because there is just one business owner, there is difficulties in raising finance. So if you need to take out debt, because there is just one business owner who's going to be able to drive all this, the banks might not lend as much money. So you can see there are many benefits and limitations or disadvantages of being a sole trader. So then we move into a partnership, and you'll start to see maybe a pattern here. Some of the disadvantages of one are solved by another type of business, just like a partnership solves some of the issues with a sole trader, but it comes with its own risks and disadvantages as well. So a partnership tries to overcome some of the limitations of having just one business owner. And this is a form of business ownership that combines the expertise and resources of between 2 and 20 people. And it's important to remember that specific terminology, because remember we're in year 12. So as with sole traders, they have still one specific disadvantage, and that is that they have unlimited liability. They are liable for all the losses in a business. But there are some specific benefits of a partnership or advantages of being a partnership that set it apart from a sole trader. Yes, it is still simple and inexpensive to set up. And even more so, the workload or risk is shared between the partners. And that is a unique advantage to a partnership compared to a sole trader. You might remember as a sole trader, one of the disadvantages was you couldn't get as much finance. But because you have more people in ownership in a partnership, there is an increased access to capital, and that's machinery and skills, knowledge, skills, and experiences. So because we have more owners, we have more access to the capital, so finance and equipment, the knowledge and the skills and experience, because we're combining all the unique skill sets of lots of people. Because we have more owners, it's actually also more flexible than a sole trader. You can take time off if you're sick or to go on a holiday without the need for the business to close down, because there are other owners that do the work as well. So it addresses a lot of the disadvantages of sole traders. So why is it not inherently better than a sole trader? Because it has disadvantages, and some unique ones compared to sole traders. Because there are more business owners, there are potential for conflicts and disputes. A disadvantage that gets solved by a future type of business, companies we'll talk about in a second, there is no perpetuity. That means the partnership does not have an ongoing life. That means it doesn't last forever. And if a partner leaves or there is a dispute, the business may break up. The partnership does not have an ongoing life. We talked about the disadvantage continues of unlimited liability, an important one to remember. And this ownership structure and bringing in new partners can be quite complex, and that adds cost to it. You might understand that to have all these owners can make it a bit more complex. So if we're to simplify the advantages and disadvantages, the benefit is that you have more people, so you have more skills and knowledge that you can leverage, but it becomes more complex and there's a chance for disputes. But you might see a common disadvantage, and that is this concept of unlimited liability. So how do we solve this? Because it doesn't seem like a great way to go through life, understanding if your business fails, you are liable for all the debts and you might lose all your personal wealth. People are entrepreneurial and they come up with a solution. And one of the solutions that they came up with was a company. A company is a separate legal entity, and that's really important. It's a separate entity, completely separate from all the owners. So if you think about partnership and a sole trader, they kind of were together. So if that's a sole trader owner, or if we have lots of them as a partnership, they are still the same entity as the business. But a company, which might have lots of owners or only a few, and we'll learn about that now in a second, is actually a separate legal entity to the business. So that solves some of the issues, and it solves the particular shortfall of unlimited liability. So companies will now, we will learn, have something called limited liability. The business owners, because they are separate legal entities from the business, the people who have lost money or owed money by the business cannot go and try and get the money from the business owners because they're separate. There are some, when we'll talk about the disadvantages, to establish a company, owners must go through a process of incorporation, which is a little bit more complicated, but this is the process which legally declares a corporate entity as being separate from its owners, and there are massive advantages to that. Now, we've talked about how there is limited liability. You can read this if you want to pause it. Importantly, we're going to quickly go through the fact that there are two types of companies: a private limited company and a publicly listed company. A private limited company is a separate legal entity, but it has only between 2 and 50 shareholders. And we're going to start to use the term shareholders for companies, but these are essentially your business owners. It can be recognized by the name, and you might have seen this before, PTY Limited. This stands for Proprietary Limited. This is really popular with businesses that once started as sole traders and partnerships and have expanded and grown and don't like unlimited liability and are now grown up enough that they can afford, and it's worth the time and effort to become a company. What are the benefits? It has limited liability. We've talked about that a lot. Because there are more owners, capital and finance and debt can be raised more easily because they can just go and find more shareholders or owners. And that's what we mean by issuing more shares. So you can get another owner to come in. They have to pay money to do that, and then you're raising money. Now, because it is a separate legal entity, the businesses that are companies have something called perpetuity. That means they will last forever because they're a separate legal entity. So a death or a removal of a shareholder, an owner, does not threaten the existence of this business. So why is not every business a company? Because these are great advantages. There are still disadvantages. The major ones is that these are highly complex to establish. There's lots of paperwork to complete. And if they're complex and there's lots of paperwork, there's higher establishment costs and higher degree of ongoing rules and reporting because there is lots more owners. The owners are separate, so they need to have all this information. Now, what does that mean? That means lots more money, lots more expenses. You have to pay more for accountants and lawyers and consultants to do all this information. So benefits: limited liability, ongoing perpetuity, easy to raise debt. You have more business owners can add a bit of expertise, but the downside is it is takes a lot of time, and it is quite costly. And if we want to even expand it even more, we can have a publicly listed company. This is a legal entity whose shares are freely traded on the stock exchange, and that means any member of the public can buy it. That means there is almost an unlimited number of owners that could be part of the company, because we ourselves could go on and pool our money and buy some shares and become an owner in a publicly listed company. This form of company is really popular for businesses seeking to grow their operations because they can always sell more shares. Anyone can buy them. so they are going to have lots of access to capital. The benefits, and we're going to go through this a bit quicker because it's similar to the private listed company. It still has limited liability. They have an even greater ability to gain extra capital, debt, equipment through the selling of shares, and they still have perpetuity. The limitations get ramped up more, so they have these advantages are ramped up, but the limitations are ramped up even more because it becomes even more highly complex to establish. There is even higher establishment costs, and there is even higher degree of rules and reporting requirements. Because if you think about it, anyone can buy these stocks, and they need to have accurate information before they buy it, and it needs to be freely available. So there are rules set by the government outlining what you do. And if you ever go onto the ASX website, you can start to have a look at these companies that you could buy a share of, and you'll see all their reporting requirements, and you can see it's a lot. So they are the four major types of businesses: sole traders, partnerships, and the two types of companies, private and public. If you want to apply this exercise, a great way is to start to think about what an exam question would be. And the great starting point is to always think about the task word you could see, and often this task word is discuss. And to discuss means you're going to have to present both sides of an argument and talk about the strengths and weaknesses, pros and cons. So I encourage you to spend 10 minutes and to select two types of these businesses and write out a response. If we're pretending it's a 6-mark response, you're going to talk about the advantages and disadvantages about the two of them and talk about the relative strengths and weaknesses. And by that means, give me your opinion, which one is a better one. So we're almost turning that discuss into an evaluate. And I encourage you to do that. Now, as we move on, there are two others that we want to quickly talk about. And these are our enterprises, social enterprises, and government-owned enterprises. These are still businesses. So that's an important thing to remember. Remember, the key knowledge point is types of businesses. A social enterprise is still a private business. So it's not necessarily just a charity, but its purpose is to distribute its profit, because it still wants to make lots of profit to benefit the community. So its purpose is to benefit the community by making lots of profit, rather than individual shareholders. So they could be structured as a for-profit or a not-for-profit, but regardless the aims, they want to fulfill a social, cultural, economic, or community goal. So the important bit here is that they are structured and run like a business. They produce goods or services, but they redirect the profits to help a cause. You might want to research some of these ones, the series Fair Food or Street, or you might have heard of the business called Thank You. These businesses are run for profit. They might make a lot of profit, but they try and use that profit for good. The advantages are that these businesses can address the needs in want of society that might not be commercially sensible. So they might be meeting something that needs to be met in the society that other businesses will not. Because other businesses aren't incentivized necessarily, for example, to fix poverty. And this social need, meeting this need, can have a great positive impact on the people or the environment. And by producing these goods, we might not be creating as much harm. So what are some of the challenges these social enterprises face? It's sometimes difficult for them to obtain capital or money required to start the business, because it's hard to finance, because businesses, banks want profit, investors want return on their investment, and these businesses aren't necessarily trying to maximize their profit. They might have significant costs that other businesses might not take on. They might have to take on parts of their business knowing that they're not going to make profit. And it can be really difficult to balance the financial and social objectives. How do we continue to be a good business making profit while meeting the needs that we want in society? So it can be quite challenging. And the final one that we want to talk about is what we call a government business enterprise. This is a public sector business. This means it is government owned and operated, and it exists to make, but it exist to produce goods and services which try and make a profit. So they are owned by shareholders, mainly often the government, and run by a board. And often they provide essential community services, but while still trying to make a profit. And they exist because often a traditional business won't do this, but we still need this to occur. And this might be things like communication, Australia Post, telecommunication, so the broadband network, and housing and transport and health services. These are things that Australia needs, society needs, and if a business isn't going to do this effectively, governments might create their own businesses. Benefits being that they can deliver community services. They can operate independently from governments, so they are set up theoretically as independent. We'll talk about a disadvantage in a second. And they can create healthy competition for private businesses trying to do this as well. The limitations being there can be political interference. Governments are often trying to win elections and might put pressure on this business to do something that doesn't make much sense. And they tend to be a little bit less efficient than private businesses due to red tape, excessive regulation, and interference. And with that, guys, we come to the end of this video. Our first video in Year 12 Business Management, so probably one that's a bit longer than normal. I hope you found this useful and it's helped you understand the types of businesses, and in particular the advantages and disadvantages of them.